check, we're just going in now.
Carefully tried to see who's on the screen, but I haven't tried to see who's actually here. I'm getting to actually in a strange place where my glasses are no longer. I'm not quite sure whether they help or not. So perhaps we could just have a little stretch. And a little kind of settle into your seat. And just a few verses of remembering, right? And then we'll sit together for a few minutes, and then I'm going to make a space for any kind of observations or questions or offerings, and then we'll sort of plunge ahead with a few poetic ideas. In the immeasurable expanse of nature in process, in faith and trust and wonderment, we give ourselves to this suchness, this seamless mystery of birthing dying. Spacious, loving, with feet solid in the earth, we nurture the hints at blessedness, the myriad faces and masks of luminous knowing. Moving as this flow of compassion and deepening inquiry, we engage with all beings in ways that support the integrity, the stability, and the beauty of the entire field of life and living. I take refuge in wisdom, compassion, and non-clinging awareness. I take refuge in the full richness of here. I take refuge in the ever-present immediacy of now. Truth is all-pervading. It is the suchness of this moment, the thusness that we are. My refuge is to live within the truth. Sadhu. last session, we really looked a little bit more deeply into our foundation. We had this huge, long whatting and whying and whereing and howing and whoing and so forth of our mothers and mothering, which of course we could sort of abbreviate in, I come from my mother, and mother I be, forest and sky and thee. And in your contemplations of this foundation, what on earth, where have you come from? What on earth is actually going on? And perhaps out of this share some observations of what is really kind of moving you at this particular stage of your life and living. If we had a room and a screen load of 20-year-olds, I think I would approach this differently. Okay? But we have a lot of life experience. And if we're not beginning to question by now, don't worry about it. You're not going to find some neat technique that'll start the questioning going, right? It's what on earth's going on? And so, although we can further this, I can kind of throw out some more poems and some ideas and so forth. We have kind of given this series of sessions the kind of broad title of Poetry, Community, and a Life of Caring and Sharing. And I can't do community other than without you, right? I can't do community without you. Okay? Without you, there is no Sangha. Right? Community. Okay? And so let's have a bit of a space here for people, those that are participating by Zoom, right? If you kind of wave Stephen can kind of keep an eye on the screen a little bit, and kind of frantically wave like crazy if you'd like to speak and unmute yourself. And of course the people in the room, you don't need to frantically wave, you'll probably just start off. We'll have to wave to stop you. Any observations or sharings or themes that are meaningful to you, that are arising?
Maybe Tatcha and I can start by saying how wonderful it is to be back after I've watched on Zoom sometimes, but
yes.
To be back here, delightful.
Mm.
And I'm not so very old yet, but I feel older than I used to be. And one of the things that makes me feel older is the sense of, it is like this. And I've always guessed known the breadth of how things are, and that you plant a garden and weeds and plants all arise together, and in our lives the same happens, but it's like, I really am always going to be like a magpie that puts little treasures in and then they fall out, and I'm like, I remember that again, and I wish I were different sometimes, but that just seems to be the way, and it's not only that, but it's like, it really is like this. And although I used to be idealistic and think, we can make the world better, it is just like this. And the beautiful and the not so beautiful, the delightful and the difficult, they all arise together in me and outside of me and in each of us. And I guess I have a greater appreciation of that now than I used to have, a tender appreciation of that. And I thank you for supporting that over the last few years, that tenderness.
My delight, and now I don't have to give any more class today. Tenderness. Right? But we'll get to that.
Well, before you retire, would you please recite Lost?
The request was for me to recite a poem that's called Lost by David Wagner. Stand still. The trees beside you and the bushes in front of you are not lost. Wherever you are is called here, and you must treat it as a powerful stranger. I'll add a little bit to the poem. Don't take here for granted. You must treat it as a powerful stranger, must ask permission to know it and be known. The forest breathes. It whispers, I have made this place around you. If you lose it, you may come back again saying, here. No two bushes are the same to raven. No two branches are the same to wren. If what a bush does or a branch does is lost on you, then you are truly lost. Stand still. The forest knows where you are. You must let it find you. Beautiful last line. Right? And the art of being willing to be found, which is quite different than the desperation hoping to be found.
I was thinking the other day that the way that one receives an answer after having asked a question is all tied up with the sense of openness. And I was reflecting how some people receive, say, an answer to a question of, oh yes, yes, I know that, and da 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 da. And so there's no openness, there's no quality of maybe something new, or allowing something new to come in. Even though what they're saying is, yes, I know that, they probably do know it, but there's still not that essential quality of just being open to let whatever comes in come in. And I was thinking how common that is in our society. We're so quick to be almost like defensive of, yes, I know that, rather than just waiting, stand still.
Anna, can you unmute you? Yeah.
Hi, Touch, and hello, everyone. I'm on a very interesting journey right now, doing a detox on a juice fast, and I'm up to the 8th week now, and the first few weeks was just drinking juice, and then about week 5 I just became quite nauseous and it wouldn't go away and I couldn't get on top of it. So the person that's leading this process suggested I started eating fruit. When I was in the grip of the nausea, and there was a willfulness in me that didn't want to give up, so that was interesting to observe because I'm doing this for a purpose. And then there was some fear that was coming in around watching how I was becoming weaker and weaker and feeling more and more fragile. And then there was another part that was just so, I almost feel tearful, just so in awe of how the body knows what to do. And just like that Lost poem, you just stop and listen and observe and be with it. And the fear that came up reminds me of a theme I've never come to grips with on meditation retreats about a fear of running out of energy. And this is, I think, a fear of death. I think this is what it is. And I think I was having a little mini experience in those days of the nausea where all I was managing to do was drink water. And just watching my energy just dissipating away. Also observing how sharp my mind was, other aspects of me. It was just the most incredible experience. And all the meditation I've done over the years and the pujas in the morning and, you know, reflections on death and dying and, oh yes, I'm not scared of death. It's like it's there. It's like, how do you get to a point where you can feel peaceful about dying when you start to mini experience it, up comes the fear. I can't believe it. It's just primal almost. Yeah, so that's just what I'm working with right now. It's quite an interesting experience.
Yeah, good.
If you've got any comments, that would be great. But other than that, I just thought I'd share it.
Well, I mean, I can make some comments, just quickie ones, right? By no means exhaustive or anything, but I mean, to deal with our fear of death, probably we need to have a look at our fear of living. Strangely enough, right? You know, it's the flip side. We think we're afraid of death, but you know, what is living? Okay, we can get terribly intellectual about it and say that, you know, in the course of living your life, bazillions of cells have died and all this kind of thing, right? We know this, right? And yet we're focused on the loss part, as if somehow this thing called death, what is it? What do I mean by death that I'm afraid of? Right? And so, you know, it can be an invitation to kind of look more deeply into, we talk about the undying state, right? The unborn, undying state. I have to wait for my poems today. Stand still. The body knows where you are. You must let it find you. Michael?
Just, I came today because I don't spend enough time in the quiet. You know, I'm quite happy with where I'm at. There's no, but it just, and so anyway, I came here because of the Sangha, because you mentioned the Sangha, and I came here because people know, many people in this room, to some degree, know what I'm doing, what I do, what we do. And so it's just, I just came to be with people who do what we do. So, yeah.
That's worth doing.
I've got like an observation or a question. I'm not sure what it is, but it's come to me quite a few times, and it's about is it necessary when we practice, or for anybody in life, to be able to practice and to have faith, you know, and it comes kind of within a context, I think, of concerns about children and kind of what they're aspiring to and who their role models are, and things like video games and things like that. But if I can give an example, so it's things like, you know, if we take the phrase, I wish to settle into the fullness of the living that I am. So if we take that phrase and contemplate that when we're meditating, it's like a letting go. So with that letting go, I just contemplate, is it necessary for people to have a faith, to be able to let go too? Do you know what I mean?
I'm not sure if I do, because I need to ask you a question.
Yeah.
What do you mean by faith?
I I think in order to let go, it strikes me that
I mean, how are you using that word? What is it?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good question. I think it's just in order to let go. I feel like all that I've kind of contemplated and practiced and meditated has given me a faith, a way of kind of a faith. It doesn't have to be a religious faith, but it's a seeing myself, seeing the bigger world,
Mm-hmm.
and that maybe that I'm a small part of that, the small self, and then there's the larger self, that the larger world that you can connect to. So it's a question around. I sense a faith into beingness, a kind of a connection, and how that holds me.
Well, do you need faith in order to let go into interbeingness? Or is the letting go in interbeingness a demonstration of faith? I don't see that there's two things here we're talking about. And so, do I need it? No, you don't need it, but then you won't be it. Right? It's this is how I look at it. Right?
Susan and Bill.
Bill? This is great. We've got all these people participating. If you keep on going like this, I won't even get to my poems. Where did you go, Bill? You just...
Yeah, am I here? Can you hear me?
Yes.
The class on the previous class session was I just wanted to share that it just took me to my original introduction to the teaching was through the Tibetan connection, pretty much, and there's all those wonderful prayers in the Nondro, all my mother's limitless as the sky.
Yes.
And honestly, I just have to share. I mean, honestly, the Tibetan rendition of the teaching was so impenetrable to me, and but sharing in these classes and the more contemporary take on, or the language that you've developed and shared with us, and like out of the last session, I mean, I'm just so respectful of the Tibetan. It's made me hugely more respectful and appreciative of the Tibetan tradition, because honestly, it was just so impenetrable culturally for me. And to actually understand that my own direct experience is fundamental, and then to see the Tibetan rendition as an expression and flowering of or kind of hints or poetry, pointing the finger pointing to the moon. I mean, it's just a delight. Anyway, that's been lovely. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Was there someone else?
Susan.
Susan?
I'm in Canada and it's fall, and I haven't been following your last class because I was busy, so I'm not sure whether we're adhering to a theme, but just in the spirit of being in the here and now, and I was just recovering from COVID, and I had this very extreme fatigue, and I decided to treat myself to a few nature walks. So I'm just going to read you a couple poems that came to me the last couple of days. And maybe you guys in New Zealand who are in spring might not be able to relate to this, but they're very short. So do you want to hear them?
Yes, please.
It must be a good time for Pisces to write poetry, because I used to be into it and it's sort of come back to me. Tonight I noticed that my shiny metal chimney pipe reflected the soft mid-blue of the sky along most of its length, and then the gold of the sunset just there where it bent. Do we too reflect what's around us differently along our length?
Beautiful.
And anyway, that was just a sunset poem. And then this was one with falling leaves, which you might recall from when a long time ago you were in Ontario. Yellow black walnut leaves are dancing in my backyard in the autumn sun, keeping time to sitar music playing on the radio in the background. I'm listening and living through this as east and west run through each other's veins at this mysterious converging time. It was Ravi Shankar was playing on the radio, and Sally Svenningson and I, when her mother was dying, I kind of lured her out to a concert, and we got to see Ravi Shankar and his daughter Anushka the last time he was in Toronto, and it was quite something. And it's the pauses and trills and the way he plays. Mm-hmm. I once heard Shrish Chamoy too, so it's not just the notes, there's a lot more to it. And I was thinking that we, as Westerners, and you guys in New Zealand too, we're being kind of molded into more of a compatibility with Eastern sensibilities as well. And they're stretching our ability to hear and our ability to feel and our ability to process. Anyway, that was just two things that happened in my here and now a couple days ago in Canada in the fall.
The thought comes to my mind as I'm listening to you of like there's roughly 8 billion human beings on the planet. And it's just the inconceivable amount of poetic experiencing that is actually probably going on, mostly invisibly, you know, because it's not, we don't dialogue on these levels normally, you know, it's all just internal. I'm sure there's like bazillions of unwritten poems and songs and so forth, you know, the creativity. If you just imagine like the sheer bulk of it, it's fantastic.
Yeah, as you get older and your memory sort of flies by, if you don't write it down, it's just gone like a bird or a dragonfly. Terry Pratchett used to write about that, how there were all these photons of inspiration floating through the universe, and every once in a while they hit the brain of somebody who could actually process them.
Janet also had her hand raised.
So thank you for allowing a space for this.
Good. Janet? You have to unmute yourself. We can't hear you very well.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't find the unmute button at the moment there. I was just going to say, you can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I was just going to say, Rita, about the mothering. What is working on me at the moment, what I'm interested in is a phrase from the Primordial Dharma, well, just a couple of words actually, profoundly releasing. And I find that very evocative, and the mothering aspect is kind of like, I mean, I'm not examining all beings my mother, it's just like all beings my mother support this profound releasing. That's all I wanted to say.
Can I invite just a little quickie little stretch on everybody's part? You'll have to bear with me as I'm reading some of these parts, because I'm going to have to kind of go back and forth between trying to see you my usual glasses don't seem to work anymore, so I'm going to have these old-fashioned ones, like so I can kind of look down and read, and then I can look up and I can still see something. Right? And you know, in a way, we could consider the kind of theme, if you like, of our last session, and focusing using that poem to those, actually a number of poems that were triggered by my experience with my mother as she was dying. But it's really a deep contemplation of our interbeing, interknowing, interconnectedness, right? And it's not just a one-way thing, like, you know, like I'm receiving this from Mother, but I'm also simultaneously mothering, right? You know, in the sense of supporting and giving and being supported, right? There's no beginning or end to this. And this week, that's in a sense we could say that's a view of life. That's kind of a view. And this week I'd like to really see if we can look into kind of like, how can we cultivate this? How can we, what can we, like a practice to make this more kind of vibrantly real and present, right? So these are a few. The first poem is really a kind of an aspiration to enter into this. And it goes like this. I think we modern humans are mostly skithering on surfaces. Sparkling colours and jingly jangly sounds. Sometimes we push hard and a strong wake marks our track. More sparkle, more jingle jangle, bubbling the lives of other tourists, travelers crazed and hungry, all recording images in a manic grab at meaning. I yearn for depth, for muted mystery and the deep voice of time. To open the stopcocks of my fiberglass runabout boat and let the seeing, S-E-A, and let the seeing of the whole living world moisten my centuries' dark, dry places, soaking in the liquidity of life and sinking like a seed, full of faith, falling into the fertile loam of here. I feel a need to garden, but the stirring is deeper still. To be a garden, to be a home, to let the skithering skither, a decorative activity, to open all the doors, all the windows, all the knotholes, all the letter slots, to open in transparency, in wonderment, in delight and reverence, solid, timeless, roots feeling their way multidimensionally, deepening into the soil of fullness. Skithering around on surfaces is kind of what we humans mostly do, it seems. Right? And at the beginning, and some of the subsequent poems are going to take us towards a beginning, a more beginning than this. Right? There was a time when we weren't skithering around on surfaces. Right? But we sort of found ourselves surrounded in a wonderful Skither Sangha. You know, there's Karma Karju and Skither, Karma Skither, right? So it's a much bigger Sangha. Like far more beings are engaged in the Karma Skither, you know, the activity of skithering, right, than in Karma Karju. And it becomes a habit. Sometimes we skither not because we want to skither, because that's kind of the only thing we really know that we do. We just kind of do it. Right? And yet, from time to time, increasingly, well, for everyone who's here, for sure, otherwise you wouldn't be here, right? There's a yearning for depth, right? For the kind of, for deep time. Right, to somehow kind of go deeper than that, like falling into, it's almost like you're going to sinking down into the depth, right? To allow the seeing in. So you've got to, it doesn't come across when I speak it. It has to be read, right? So you can see the spelling, right? Allow the oceaning in, and in that there's a new seeing, right, of the world. Right? And can we sink into this loam of now? This is before we start to meditate. This is our aspiration for our meditation practice. Yeah. I feel the need to garden, but the stirring is deeper still. To be a garden. To what degree are you a garden? I know this is really hard for city folks who live in high-rise apartment buildings, right? But maybe you got a pot plant, right? You could observe, right? What does it mean to be a garden? Right? To be a home for countless beings. To let the skithering skither, not to get at war with the skithering. It kind of skithers around. Little insects, little flits of light on leaf, right? There's all kinds of skitherings, but deeper down there's this something. What? To open all the doors. All your doors. How many doors do you have closed? Maybe you've got your doors open, but have you got your windows open? Right? And maybe you got your doors and windows open, but that's not enough. Open all the knot holes. I'm assuming I live in a wooden house, right? And you know, there's actually lots of knots, and they've plugged them. The people who made built the house, right? But they kind of knot holes, right? Let open all the openings, right? Knot holes are where. Actually, holes are indicative of where there was once a branch growing. Right? Right? Open up even your branchings. Right? Open all the letter slots. Right? To open in transparency, in wonderment, in delight and reverence. Solid, timeless. Roots feeling their way multi-dimensionally, deepening into the soil of fullness. Just coming to your breathing right now. Can you get a sense like deepening into the soil of fullness? It's for me, I can feel sensations in my belly, a softening, opening. And then suddenly we're skithering around on surfaces, jingly jangly. And remembering, right? This kind of yearning. And as we get older, one of the great things about disintegration, old age, decay, and kind of decrepitude, right? Is that actually you've got nothing else to do except deepen into the fullness, right? How great is that, right? And the problem isn't deepening into the fullness. The problem is the habit of skithering, which we are kind of maybe sometimes not convinced we should let go of. Eh? Well, I really ought to skither. I have to be responsible. I have to keep skithering. Right? And yet, right, meditation practice is deepening into the soil of fullness. And it only comes with faith. Funny how the questions and the poems go together. Mm. A second poem. I gave it a title. It's called Tracking Our True Nature. I'm going to just have another go at the first. These ones weren't working. I'll see this. It's kind of, I'm finding it. What's kind of difficult with my current seeing situation is that my depth perception is kind of shot, and I find it. I get used to seeing at a certain kind of distance and so on, and then if I change it and try and so when I'm looking around and seeing people at different places in the classes, going like this, right? So it's an interesting challenge. So this one's called Tracking Our True Nature. Observing wildlife, one must learn to be very still and patient. To become part of the foliage, to disappear in a hide, to observe the untamed, unfamiliar wilderness of our own unexplored body-mind. We need the same kind of stealth. We need to hunker down, close to the ground of being. A novice watcher researcher often becomes so still their muscles can ache in frozenness and their minds can ache with expectation. But if this passion for contemplative inquiry becomes lifelong, we eventually learn to relax at ease, disappearing in the fabric of spontaneously existing interbecoming. This is true samatha. The two together, stillness and observation, is something marvelous. I'd like to just read it again. I mean, you know, I got on a kick with this idea a number of years ago, and then yeah, as you do with various ideas you get enthusiastic about, you dance around with it for a while and then sort of put it aside, and I completely put it aside, and now boom, here we are decades later, it's popping up again. But I went on a kind of jag of accusing all of ours, me and you too, right, of being dedicated to the project of domesticating everything. Right? We wanted to kind of domesticate our lives and domesticate the world. Right? And we're kind of terrified of wilderness. Must treat it as a powerful stranger. It might eat you. Right? But you might be able to eat it. Must ask permission to know it and be known. Right? And this sense of like the wilderness, to enter into the wilderness, to realize actually that my life is not domesticated. My life, my body is a wilderness. My mind is a wilderness. Right? It's this extraordinary, filled with creatures and things that go bump in the night. Right? Observing wildlife, one must learn to be very still and patient. Right? I'm sure we've got a good cross-section of David Attenborough devotees attending this class, I'm sure. Right? And you know, in the latter part of his professional journey, they took to, you know, after they do some fantastic show on something or another, there'll be a short snippet at the end of how the photographers went out and filmed this, right? And I remember seeing once a film of a snow leopard that was chasing some sort of little gazelle-y kind of creature, like in the mountains of the Hindu Kush, right, in northern Pakistan. And it turns out that, and this sequence is it's incredibly exciting, and it's like, wow, it was amazing. And then you find out at the end that this guy had sat inside a hide, you know, like a kind of a disguised area with his camera for 6 months to film like 2 minutes worth of thing, right? 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 This is an experienced observer of wildlife. Right? Observing wildlife, one must learn to be very still and patient. When's nirvana going to happen? When am I going to realize the nature of mind? Is this suchness? Right? What samadhi am I now in? You know, not just be patient. Just observe. You know, and the photographer, you know what he talked about? He talked about the inconceivable amount of boredom that was there. Can you imagine this? Can you imagine, like how are you going to bore into something unless you're a master of boredom? Right? Observing wildlife, one must learn to be very still and patient, to become part of the foliage, to disappear in a hide. To observe the untamed, unfamiliar wilderness of our own unexplored body-mind. We need the same kind of stealth. This is an invitation to all of us, right? Can we settle into, you know, some people are sort of fanatic bird watchers, right? Not a day goes by with them. They're always like, what's the matter? They're obsessed with going out and watching birds, right? There's other obsessional scuba divers and reef explorers and so on, you know. Imagine being like equally obsessed with exploring the untamed wilderness of our own unexplored body mind. Once it's explored, the act of exploring it is also the act of domesticating it. Right? And the wilderness is always just around the next corner. Right? It's an interesting, hold this one, right? Can I stop? Right? My falling apart, right? Things aren't going the way they used to go. It's not going the way I expected it to go. It's not fair. Have any of you ever felt that? Right? Right? And then, you know, this is the wilderness of my own mind. Can I stop and disappear into the foliage? Be still. Stand still. The trees beside you and the bushes in front of you are not lost. We need to hunker down close to the ground of being. I remember Thich Nhat Hanh talking about healing work and drawing our attention to how when a cat gets ill, it will often, I mean, I'm talking about a house pet, like a, domesticated cat pet, right? Will often leave the house and go and disappear, and you might find them hunkered down under a bush, right? And their bellies are close to the ground, and their tongue sometimes, and they're, maybe even panting, right? And they're just, and it's like it's almost like, if you've had a really serious encounter with death, with proximity of death, you might know this. Like it's almost like you're nurturing what feels like you're nurturing this tiny little flicker of a flame. It's like just totally. You don't want to talk to anybody. You can't. Everything's too much. You're just there to breathe in and to breathe out. It's like you're nurturing this kind of little flicker there, and so you hunker down close to the ground of being, and you're nurturing this flicker of aliveness, right? Now, a novice watcher, researcher, meditator often becomes so still that their muscles can ache in frozenness. Right? Have you ever experienced that? Yeah? You ever got... Right? Their minds can ache with expectation. Right? But if this passion for contemplative inquiry becomes lifelong, in other words, this is not something you sort of, well, fortunately, you're not all going to leave because I say this. If I'd said it 40 years ago, you might have gone up and left, right? But meditation is not a technique that you do correctly and then you get the goodies. It's a lifelong, living is a lifelong journey. It's obvious. If this passion for contemplative inquiry, right, and the art of contemplative inquiry, of like being able to hunker down, right, close to the ground of being, sensitively, right? Eventually we learn to relax at ease in such contemplative inquiry, disappearing in the fabric of spontaneously existing interbecoming. You don't have to invent interbecoming. It is. And if it's interbecoming, Anna, right, then at that moment it's becoming. That means death is with us all the time, because there was just the moment before that we're no longer, because now we're becoming. Right? There's something in here, the living, like you can't have living without dying. Actually, it's like you can't have living without birthing, or dying without birthing, right? And living is birthing dying. Okay. So, another stretch.
Could you say that living is dying, birthing?
It's dying, birthing, birthing, dying. I just like it's a hyphenated. It's a single word. Like the act of dying is a continuous birthing. I mean, I'm not trying to be philosophical. It's like, but it sounds philosophical kind of thing, right? I mean, we exist. I've come to have a tremendous confidence that I exist in the living that I am. And actually, that makes it, that throws a big curve into the idea of being frightened of dying. Because anyone who's frightened of dying is demonstratively living. Like, dead people aren't frightened of dying. Our business is living, not dying, right? In a sense of some end point, but living is this continual birthing, dying. That is the living, right? And so the more we throw ourselves into the living, if you want to, in a sense, the Tibetans have said this, if you want to know about, what's going to happen when you die, then give some attention to how you live. There's actually nothing profound about this. And yet there is. It's very, very deep. Now there is a word that's become so kind of domesticated that we need to kind of rewild it or something, right? And because we talk about the fundamental practice, right, is one of mindfulness. Okay? And so I'd like to, this last poem is really an exploration of mind, a kind of a fresh approach to the idea of mind and mindfulness. But I'm just thinking, occasionally this thought comes into my mind at the end of one of our Sunday sessions, that maybe we should have had a 5-minute break because there might have been bladders that were bursting and so forth. So let's have just a 5-minute break, just in case anyone needs to pop off to the loo, because I know you'll be greatly relieved, and you'll enjoy the poetry a lot better. Okay?
You might need to go to large print.
It does. I do that when I'm reading on the screen. I jack the print up. It's just monstrously huge, and I don't need my glasses. It's fantastic, right? I haven't got to the point yet where I have to scroll across to get the end of the word. It's not that big.
Encourages brevity.
It's not that big. But I haven't learned the art of doing that with a print book. How to kind of, and I can settle into reading with my glasses on a print book, and it's hard. It's a bit of a strain, but it's tiring. But I can do it. But the thing is that then when I look up, everything's like seriously unfocused, and it takes there's a lag. And then when I look back at the print, and the print's unfocused. It seems to be, it's not easy to kind of shift the focal length. There's something kind of draggy about that.
You've got these little devices off the TV shop called Eye Candy, and really all it is, it's a flat page, and it's in a certain grid, and its shape on the texture of the page, bit of plastic, and it magnifies.
I've seen those, yeah.
And the ones that on the TV shop had lights on the opposite side, so you could actually light up your page.
Yeah.
And I found them useful, and then I gave them to a couple of other people because I didn't need them anymore, and they also found them quite useful.
Yeah,
So,
I'd forgotten that, but on the age-related macular degeneration site, one of the people was talking about that, and they showed a picture of it and everything. It looked quite good, actually, quite a handy little
I think I
device.
just, possibly under what you're doing here.
And it had it was like a magnifying glass, and then there was a ring of LED light bulbs around it on the other
You
side.
needed to light it up, so it's about a 3 times
Yeah.
magnification.
Yeah. I might end up trying that.
They might even downtown just have those pages. I know the Blind Foundation. You can just buy the sheet of this stuff without the lights and all the
Yeah.
rest of it.
I've seen those as
I
well.
might even have one at home somewhere.
But what's interesting is I'm finding that I'm actually not using my classes so much anymore, because I find that their focal length is, I get used to seeing there and then I can't shift. Whereas it's kind of easier just to have it a kind of little bit of a continuum blur.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, each person out there in Cyberland has their own toilet. So if you have to run off to the loo, there's nobody there. Whereas here we got like 15 people in the room, and so there's a queue, so it takes a little bit of time.
You go and squat outside.
Yeah, I've got lots of outside.
Give it a hold your hand, Kelvin. We can go out together.
You so kind.
Thank you.
You wouldn't be the first.
This last verse, poem, whatever we're going to call it, string of words, is to be found in my Foundations of Mindfulness book, if you want to reference it after the class. So I've called it Mind and Mindfulness in Verse, a fresh approach, because I have a feeling that for many people mindfulness is, it conjures up the idea of a practice, something that you do. And the sense that, you need to be introduced to this practice. Jane, it's terrible, I'm going to pull the rug right out from underneath you. You have to be taught this practice, right? And yet, actually, this poem suggests that perhaps mindfulness is inherently what we are, right? So what we're really doing is just kind of illuminating what's already there. Right? How to speak about this mystery? Let's not domesticate mindfulness. Let's allow it to be a mystery. Right? I mean, you take a stardust, right? I mean, I'm not aware of stardust coming down in a purified form, but you could get a big pile of carbon, and you get a big pile of phosphorus, you get a big pile of magnesium, and you get a big pile of, or a big kind of ocean of oxygen and hydrogen and helium and all the various things, zincs and anything, all the little bits that you need. You put all these piles together, they sit there, and then you say, be mindful. Like, how did mindfulness arise in the universe? What on earth do we mean by mindfulness? That's not, by domesticating mindfulness and just rendering it as merely a kind of exercising attention is to sometimes hide the mystery. How to speak about this mystery? Mind is that which minds. So first of all, let's turn mind into a verb. Mind is that which minds. Do you mind? Do you care or have concerns? Please be mindful of the fact that. In other words, be careful and responsive with and to this mystery. To touch something mindfully implies touching gently and sensitively, with reverence and caring for the integrity of that particular what that you are touching. A hand, a hip, a thought, a breath of ineffable. We can touch, in traditional way of speaking, we can say, well, we can touch physically, but we can also touch mentally. And we have to kind of touch this. Try this out, right? Be careful and responsive with and to this mystery. To touch something mindfully. Most of us are sitting in a chair or something like that. So you're touching the chair. Your bottom is touching the chair. Okay? To touch something mindfully, carefully, responsively, sensitively, implies touching gently, sensitively, with reverence and caring for the integrity of that particular what that you were touching. I mean, in the early stages of mindfulness practice, we're often mindful of having wandering thoughts, which we get angry with and we try and push away. We're not touching them gently with caring. We're not cradling this wandering thought, this kind of unwholesome thought or feeling, right? We're sentencing it to a prison sentence. We're trying to eliminate it, and we call it mindfully, right? And yet, when we say, "Do you mind? Do you mind? Do you mind if I come and do this?" We're saying, do you care? Is this all right? What if mindful? The word mindful actually has something to do with this caring, with this sensitivity. It's a way we use English. Right? You mind the children. I'm watching child climbing ladder, falling on their head, screaming in pain, rising of my reaction. What's mindfulness? Some detached, kind of non-caring, non-engaged. It's absurd. Right? Touching gently and sensitively with reverence and caring for the integrity of that particular what that you are touching. A hand, a hip, a thought, a breath of ineffable. And as you touch, in turn, you are touched. So can you have a sense of I'm touching the chair with my bottom, but in a sense the chair is touching my bottom. Right? We are in touch with a feeling, and the feeling is touching us. Can you get a sense of this in touchness? This is kind of relational dialogue that's going on, not one person only observation out there. It's engagement. With mindfulness, we don't hurt this object when touching it. we treat this otherness with respect. This otherness touching their otherness that is you. Because this thing you're touching, its otherness at this point is you. So, ooh, she's touching me. It's like, this is like Escher's hands. This is like, right? Yin yang. It's surely this applies to all our senses, right? Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. We use the word touch, but right? And we see things and we're being seen. We're hearing things and we're being heard. We're smelling things and we're being smelt, savored, tasted, touched. Right? We're absolutely plunged into this ocean of becoming. Each child finds his or her way, fumbling, stumbling, growing into sensitivity, clumsy at first, and then gradually becoming smoother and more integrated, and sometimes even graceful. Think of a toddler just learning to walk. 16 years later, an Olympic gymnast poised on the balance beam, vibrantly alert and focusing. This practice. This something's growing here. It's inherent. We're learning the art of being able to touch and be touched, to be able to integrate that with our muscular movement, with our thoughts, with our feelings, with our memories, with our emotion, right? This is like there's a learning that's taking place as we learn our bodies and we learn our emotions and we learn to language and we learn to participate. You don't become an adult without learning a modicum of this. And you did most of that learning with nobody teaching it. The kids are going to school and they're supposed to learn better numeracy and literacy and all this kind of stuff, right? And meanwhile, they're busy learning all kinds of other things, but nobody talks about it, right? I'm not saying they should talk about it, but I'm just pointing out that there's a lot more life to life and learning, right? And we're learning to be able to, now I'm discovering that just to be able to track a bird as it flies through the sky, right? I mean, when I wrote that poem about watching wildlife and so on, I actually spent considerable amount of time actually watching, right? Sometimes I'd say to Mary, my binoculars are getting really hungry. We have to go on a safari. So I'd blame my binoculars because they hadn't actually seen any kind of wild, amazing, exotic birds or creatures or things like this. So we have to go out and feed my binoculars. Right? So you kind of go and look. Right? And so we kind of were learning, in a sense, we're learning to look. But then what I've discovered is that now, and I was very good at it, you know, I could just look at the bird, I'd track it, and I could see the details. I think I can see the details. I felt like I was seeing the details of the bird as it flew through the sky. Now, I'm not sure if it's a giant insect or if it's a bird, faraway bird or a giant insect up close, and I can't tell whether it's flying towards me or away from me. And all of a sudden, what a skill which was learned over time starts to disintegrate, and then I realized that was a skill. You with me on this, right? We grew into, and imagine for a moment if the organism, right, was in a place where they never touched anything with caring, with curiosity, with reverence, with engagement, with kind of respect for the other. How on earth would they ever learn to be a decent, functioning human being? This is mindfulness practice. It was going on already. A lot of what we call mindfulness practice now is so far away from real mindfulness practice. Ooh. Mindfulness is a fullness of knowing, and fullness of knowing is discernment, both detailed and vast, and love and passion and detachment and surrender and reverence and so much more. Mindfulness, care-filledness, sensitive, attentive, respectful engagement is nourished in the company of parents. Right? Children. No child grows to adulthood without someone parenting them. They might not have their genetic parents, right? But they are going to be parented, right? This mindfulness, this care-filledness, right? This go and explore, dance, move, right? Encouragements, right? To explore, right? The encouragements to have the confidence to risk and to learn as you go. Parents, good parenting, right? Is nourished in the company of parents, then teachers. Oh, well, you sit in this posture and you watch your breathing, and you're first thing, you get a basic skill set from parents, then we can get a basic skill set from teachers. Then mentors, right? It's not so much you're learning a skill or anything, but it's like you're refining it by being in the presence of someone else who has that skill and does it well, and you're kind of picking up by osmosis, right? So mindfulness, care-filledness, sensitive, attentive, respectful engagement is nourished in the company of parents, then teachers, then mentors, then lovers and friends. We copy each other, imprint on each other, responding to and with each other. It matters how we proceed. Cultivating mindfulness is to consciously grow, maturing in smooth, functional integration, a flowing of bodyhood, languaging, and integrative experience. Mindlessness takes us in a different direction, towards frustration, pain, agitation, fragmentation, distrust, and life-sapping suspicion. Mindfulness arises with interdancing. Body, speech, and mind, the entire field of interbeing, interknowing, all events and meanings, self and other, individual and groups, universes of intelligence, flowering and unfolding. What mystery, this body. Physically growing, an increased capacity for delicacy, harmony, grace, flexibility, and coordination. What mystery, this speech, skillfully intermingling, kind, uplifting, supportive, inspiring, deeply meaningful, unending communion. What mystery, this mind, a field of knowing, blossoming, attentive, inclusive, translucent, a multi-leveled, multi-domained, shimmering presence of acceptance, understanding. I've kind of put a slash, like a single word, acceptance, understanding. This minding, mindful mind is the universe in process. experience is not a subjective representation. It is not a personal representation of some mysterious otherness. It is a presentation, always present, mutually transforming, interaction of participating events. It takes two or more to language. Imagine for a moment you're sitting there all by yourself in meditation and you're watching your breath. Okay? But imagine for a moment that's not what you're doing. Imagine for a moment it shifts. And what happens is that you are sitting quietly, conventionally by yourself, right? In dialogue with your breath. In dialogue with your thoughts, in dialogue with your expectations, in dialogue with your hopes, your fears, your what have you, right? It's the same thing going on, but you could approach it a slightly different way. It takes two or more to language. Right? All my relationship, all my mindfulness is relationship in action. How can I have relationship if I don't care for what I'm relating to, if I'm just wanting to push it away and get rid of it or control it and so on? I want to relate to you, but I don't know what you are. I want to relate to the you that I want you to be. I'm going to relate to the you that I know you should be. Right? But could I be just so radically crazy and wild to relate to the being that you are in the act of relating to the wild being that I am? This is just a different space here. It's not to, this is wonderful kind of refinement. It's great to have a whole history of experience in meditative techniques and practices. But then you need to refine them and open them up. It's not a matter of true or false perception, as if there was a finite fixed being or universe out there waiting to be correctly or incorrectly perceived, something one could or should be mindful of. Rather, the unfolding dynamic of your living is engaging with the dynamic unfolding of so-called other in a collaborative whirling of ever-fresh transformation, which is your knowing now. Or do you step aside and but I want to know that knowing now? We're always stepping out of it, stepping out of it, stepping out of it. And yet in mindfulness, right, we care so much, we want to be engaged with it. I really want to know you, Lord. Right? I mean, the Beatles sang the whole thing ages ago. Rather, the unfolding dynamic of your living is engaging with the dynamic unfolding of so-called other in a collaborative whirling of ever-fresh transformation, which is your knowing now. So much more than a focused action, a daily discipline, a Buddhist meditation to practice or neglect. Right? I mean, I don't know how many times over the years I've heard as soon as you raise the question of meditation, it's followed by, but I don't practice enough. You know, so it's kind of like that's a something you neglect. Then there's a something you do, right? But there's so much more than that. Fully flowered, mindfulness perfumes everything. a quality of being transforming everything, even mundane, ordinary living. This satipatthana, this setting up of mindfulness, an always available, profoundly open way of blessing and peace. I mean, imagine to be able to just sit down in meditation and kind of engage with Avalokiteshvara or Manjushri or Guru Rinpoche or some extraordinary, like, shifting, changing, chakric, energetic kind of life experience, right? How amazing is that, right? But actually, in this one, fully flowered, right? How amazing to be engaged in anything. Imagine like bringing this so that your meditation is no longer a spiritual practice. Your mindfulness practice is not a spiritual practice. It's the practice of being alive. And in our appreciation, we might want to enhance this, to support this, right? To not just let the habit pattern of skithering around on surfaces, just continuously skither and dither and jingle and jangle and sparkle and all the stuff, and sink in depth. Mindfulness is the flavor of healthy knowing in action. So returning to the question, how to speak about this mystery, this thusness. Look around you. This is how we speak. And then there's an addendum. It's kind of in italics and it's sort of set in, it's separate from the poem. Words are like tools, and a good craftsperson cares for his or her tools. Sharpening, fashioning a new handle, a particular tool for a particular job. Jargon is a blunt chisel. May these words dance well in our minding.
Something that I'm finding nourishing me at this time, and if I can put it in, is all of the experiences that we have and are having are growing us, are giving to us. What I'm finding really nourishing at the moment is to pause and whatever those experiences are, whether they're comfortable ones or not. And to pause and be grateful for them. And give thanks and praise for them, because this is what reduces my fear of living, is being grateful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think this is the most kind of natural expression of beingness to come at this stage in most of our lives. Right? I mean, it's very wonderful to have that when you're a kid, that kind of attitude. But you know, to be able to feel, you know, how to put it, to say to someone who doesn't relate to what you're saying, Kel, and say, well, you could be grateful. It's like, look at all the good things that have happened. Be grateful. It's not something you do. It's a kind of, it's a blessing that erupts from within us, you know, and it is a blessing. And to be able to reflect on your life, you know, I mean, it's a terrible cliche kind of thing, but you know, like, can I die with no regrets? It puts it very crudely, you know, I mean, imagine dying with regrets. It's very sad. It's too late, you know. And imagine for a moment, I mean, we can, you know, like, come to the point where we're able to kind of embrace and the sense of like the privilege of being alive, and to be the privilege and the blessing to have met with these beings and to have had these experiences. And that, as you so rightly point out, I mean, it includes the struggles and the difficulties and so on.
Particularly includes the...
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you don't really realize it until you're including it. If you know what I mean. Like, I think if you're not at the stage of including the difficulties, you haven't actually realized this yet. You're kind of cruising along on the goodies. But there's a kind of a depth, and there's a kind of a to me, this is like the roots of all the great religious traditions. There's a sense of reverence and awe and wonderment and respect and gratitude in the face of the mystery, right? Which is something, and this is a very, surely this is worth cultivating, right? And in the process, like in one sense, this is like so simple. You think, how come I've got a library over in my hut with just thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of Buddhist texts, right? You know, going into extraordinary, agonizing detail of all this little bit and that bit and so on, you know, and yet you just said that we say the whole thing right here. It's kind of like, why, you know? And it's like because they're useful for the person who is kind of still feeling it supportive to be able to kind of harness their intellect and their kind of attentiveness and their right feelings and so on in a way that not only enables them to gradually come to the point where such reverence and gratitude are possible, right? But in the process, we mature in our being in doing this, right? And what I find very heartening is actually to see beings who have not pursued a spiritual path in their life, you know, like that's called a spiritual path. And they come towards, at some point in their life, and they come to exactly what you're talking about, Calvin, without any guru saying anything to them, without ever reading a spiritual poem, without ever doing their foundation practice. And they never practice mindfulness, and they don't meditate. Right? Because like really the kind of the heart, the foundation, if you like, of what we're working with, it's like in the Tibetan tradition, you know, there's a lot of reference to a body of practice called foundation practice. And I've often tried to suggest to people that they could think of foundation work or the foundation practice as in a different way than they quite often do. The foundation work is often seen as like a huge, gigantic, arduous mountain of practice that you have to do, which takes a tremendous amount of effort and a tremendous amount of time and fanatical dedication and so forth. Right? And I say, well, that may be, but the thing is that the foundation work is the work you do to discover your foundation and to realize that your foundation has been working well all along. And then the foundation work is complete. It works. Right? And to me, it's like really tremendously encouraging. Right? When I see the kind of evidence of the foundation working well in beings who have not necessarily taken any kind of conventional, it's almost like untarnished as I am by religious practice. You know, I mean, it's almost like we need to say that. Right? I'm not at all, it's like on the process of it, there's all kinds of wonderful supportive aspects, right, in traditions. But the tradition didn't create this space that we're moving towards. I mean, what do they mean by nirvana? You know, what is peace? How on earth do you meaningfully come to peace with death? How do you meaningfully come to peace with loss? How do you meaningfully come to peace with devastation? You know, if it just means, well, no more loss, you fix it up. You know, you don't die. You know, I mean, it just doesn't matter how skilled the doctor is and the medical tradition is. You know, when they're 106, you know, I mean, you know that it's unlikely to make it to 120. Right? It's not a lack of skill. Right? And can we die then? Can we then change? Can I change without regrets? Can I engage? I mean, I suppose the regrets is just because me constantly measuring it up against how good that makes me look. Whereas if I don't measure that up against how there's regret doesn't even come into it. You're just busy engaged, giving fully to this life and learning along the way, without necessarily having a philosophical position of I'm learning this. Right? And so in a way we cultivate, in a sense, attentiveness to our bodies, right? To our feelings, right? To our kind of states of mind, to our kind of constructed understandings of the world. You know, the world's made up of a whole lot of solid lumps that interact. And then we look into it, we find everything shifting and changing and dancing, and then we have a new construct. It's emptiness. It's a kind of the whole universe is like not lumps that interact. There's nothing there. You can't grasp anything. Right? And in the process there is a kind of a letting go, a letting the seeing in, right? A falling down into the loam of now. Right? And to do this care-filledly, with caring. And do you know, sometimes, have you ever noticed, we forget? Have any of you ever forgotten? You know, you kind of forget the care. Right? For a moment I'm being kind of right and righteous. and this is fair. And then and the remembering is actually satipatthana, sati, which always gets translated as mindfulness, actually means to remember. That's what it is. It means to remember. To remember what? The fullness of living that we are, the care, right? To give ourselves permission to not have to constantly keep up the skithering and perhaps, exhibit something a little bit different, a bit more grounded, a bit more caring. Yes.
Would you say, because you reference the books in your hut, that for many of us there's great value in the books because if we're called to investigate our own suffering and to want to understand its cause and to want to see that there is this other way of being, to remember this other way of being, and then to walk that path, that more structured, traditional way of viewing what we've just been swimming in has got a lot of value because it's an antidote to my suffering.
It has value as an antidote to the suffering for those for whom it's a value, who have value for it being an antidote to their suffering.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
And that there are many people in this world who are suffering greatly, who could actually benefit from such an antidote. And so the fact that there is a tradition with some sense of path.
I don't like the word antidote, by the way.
Well, or at least some kind of offering them a way to include the pain. I think, as Calvin said, it's how do I include the pain, the suffering, and still live in this way where I'm fully alive and fully engaged and fully remembering the nature of reality. It's pretty challenging for many people when they're so caught up in the world of their own suffering.
Namgyal once described what he was doing. This is Namgyal Rinpoche, my main teacher, as just giving us tons of stuff to keep us out of trouble whilst we wait for God to arrive.
You see, I would say, well, that's a very theistic.
And
there is no God going to
and well, yeah, but you're avoiding trying to understand what he's saying by just pushing that away on the word, right? For truth, for the fullness of the mystery, for the Dharma Dhatu, it doesn't matter for that and even what he's saying it to people who don't understand. But the point is that, it's like there is something, when you're born, there's already suchness manifest. You don't have to manifest it. You don't have to do anything. Massive amounts of the teaching is just kind of support to, which wouldn't be necessary perhaps, if you didn't have already in place a skithering society, right? And so we kind of need support sometimes to do what we know in our heart is a good and sensible thing to do. And after a while, as I say, the skithering itself becomes a habit. And not only that, but you can't really earn a living in the current economic world by being truthful and by being real. But you can earn a great living by being false and bullshitty. I mean, that's the skithering, right? And so we also have to kind of make a living out of this. And so like to have, that's why I say we first learn mindfulness from parents, right? We learn by observing, by osmosis kind of thing, right? Right? Then we learn from teachers. Some people never get to the teachers, right? And then people are busy learning. What do you learn from teachers? Teachers teach stuff. But then exactly the same teacher for somebody else isn't a teacher. They're not teaching stuff. They're a mentor, right? And do you have is your relationship with your teacher someone who teaches you stuff, or is the relationship with the teacher the most deep friend, lover of life, right, that you can be with? And then I said, and after mentors, lovers and friends, it all of a sudden becomes kind of ordinary in a way, but we're getting, in other words, like these relationships can encourage us, give us the courage, the heart, to be able to stand still. The trees beside you and the bushes in front of you are not lost, right? So the thing when, for example, Westerners now, we meet with Buddhist teachings and so on, and Buddhist traditions, and we often forget that actually, for the Tibetan people in Tibet before the diaspora and so on, right? They didn't choose to be Buddhists. They're just, that's what you are. You know, and actually, if you look, most of the great kind of remarkable yogis and, you know, the celebrated Milarepas and Longchenpas and so on, they were all marginal involvement in the tradition. They all went off by themselves. They threw it away. They said, neti, not this, not that, and so forth, because they saw that even the tradition itself, right, might not be supportive. It might be supportive for Buddhist skithering. Right? We're still skithering on surfaces. Right? Doesn't mean stop skithering. But it's almost like you don't have to say to the universe, to the ocean, stop frothing on the surface. Even while there's froth on the surface, there is great depth. If you're a scuba diver, you know this, right? You jump off the boat on a day when it's a lot of wave action, and you just want to get down as quickly as you can, because if you can get down 10 meters or something, and then suddenly it's like, boom, really still. Whereas up on the surface, it's like, whoa, it's like hard work on the surface, right? But you don't, the point isn't to get rid of surface. Like, I want an ocean with no surface. A bit weird, it's kind of like a, right? It's there. But in the process of kind of learning to have the skills, like what are the skills? The skills are being able to integrate your attentiveness with your physicality, with your meeting with the unexpected and the unwanted, right? And to be able to do this well and keep on going. These are the skills we're learning in the so-called tradition. We're not learning a pile of facts to be judged in a, you read all this stuff and then you set it aside and you go and you, in a sense, put it into practice. For the Western person, you know, we might find that it's really difficult to find the tradition now, because it's been, you know, in a sense, it's become the skithering of Christianity, the skithering of religion, the skithering of whatever the spiritual practice is. And so, you know, it's like, yes, we utilize it, and we use many supports, but gradually we start to have a kind of increasing confidence in our own, in a sense, life's validity. I won't even say our own validity, because my own is relational. It's like, and a kind of determination to sink into this. And it's a determination which so cuts through and goes beyond the determination that we often brought at the beginning to our, say, Buddhist practice, whereas I was determined to have my 100,000 prostrations done, right? And actually what I was interested in was completing 100,000 prostrations. That's what I was interested in. I'd forgotten all about that it was supposed to be a meditation on refuge. And I kind of I didn't particularly feel that I'd discovered any refuge, but I'd finished my 100,000 prostrations, right? And so actually that was probably maybe a better thing for me to do than to go out and become a investment banker shark, right? Right? Or maybe a munitions salesman or something, or you know what I mean, or a mercenary or something like that. And so you know, Rinpoche gave me this wonderful thing to do, fill me up, busy body work, which at least I wasn't getting into trouble. Well, gradually the reality of my beingness snuck to the surface. It was like, just stand still a bit, right? That a lot of the teaching is just keeping you out. The devil finds work for idle hands. So Rinpoche said, I'm going to keep you really busy. Do 100,000 of this. I've done that. Okay, do 100,000 of this. I had a friend who went to he studied with a different teacher. He became a monk. And this was the days when we were all completing our foundation practices. And he did all his foundation practice. And then he went back to his root lama, which was Kala Rinpoche, and said, Rinpoche, I've finished my practice now. What should I do now? He said, do it again. So he was dedicated. He went, he did it again. Right? He went back to him and he said, what should I do now? He said, do it again. I think he did it about 5 times. Right? Pretty extraordinary. Right? And one day you'll go to your teacher and say, what do I do now? And the teacher will say, have the confidence to do what you know is right. But if you were given that beautiful pith instruction on day 1, you'd go and find someone who would tell you something to do. Right? So, thank you for bearing with us.
Thank you.
Right? By the power of these wholesome activities, may our lives be rich with awakening. Living thus, may we abandon all unwholesomeness. In the very midst of this mystery of birth, illness, old age, and death, smack in the midst of it all, may we help all beings to realize their true interbeing, interknowing nature. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. There was a 4th poem I just remembered. It's on the very back of the book. There is no mystery more profound than mindfulness awareness. This is the path of living Dharma. This is spirituality and practical living all rolled into one. This is the source of joy and well-being, a wellspring of health and happiness, a treasure at the heart of everything and everyone. There is no greater mystery.